I feel like wine connoisseurs all over the world are greatly disappointed in me because this is not how you're supposed to drink wine. Our book for this episode of the Boozy Bookworm is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, and she's a brand new author for me. This is the first book I read from her. So because our book for today is a romance novel, I picked a rosé to go with it because rosés just make me think of love and romance. So I picked up a bottle of Domaine de Blaise, I don't know. It's a nice adult pour. I'm not an adult. I am going to give this wine a 3 out of 5. It's not bad. It is also an $8 bottle of wine. It's definitely not a wine for the purpose of what I'm about to do with it. So, our main don't even know what that was supposed to be. Our main character is Tate Collins, who works in a hospital and is working towards her nursing degree, and she recently moved in with her brother Corbin. And so when she arrives, she has an unexpected visitor. Also, on her ride up in the elevator, there's this man named Dylan. He gets in the elevator and instantly shoves his left hand in his pocket, you know, because he's married and trying to hide it like a scumbag. Outside the door to her now new apartment is a passed out drunk man. So Tate decides she's just gonna open the door and hope for the best. She's on the phone with her brother. She opens the door. He wakes up and she makes it into the apartment, but now he's trying to get in. So she slams his wrist in the door. And meanwhile, her brother's freaking out because he doesn't know who the man is. He's like, hold on, let me call my friend. I'll have him come help you. But lo and behold, Corbin's friend, who is supposed to help her, is in fact the passed out drunk guy. And the drunk man has a name, and his name is Miles, and he works with Corbin. They're both pilots for an airline, which is super cool. He ends up passing out on the couch, but not before he sobs himself to sleep. In Miles's sobbing state, he happens to blubber. He says, "I'm so sorry, Rachel." And Tate is like, "Rachel." Miles wakes up and is like, "What the heck did we, you know?" And she's like, "No, sicko, get out." So I'm going to tell you everything that happens in Tate's present, and then we'll go back and do all of Miles's past so that it makes sense. Because that's the only way I think I'm going to be able to do this intoxicated. So they've already started off in a pretty interesting place. Flash forward a little bit because now it's a Thursday and Corbin is doing pilot things in the sky with airplanes and stuff, and Miles and his friend Ian and Dylan are all in Tate's apartment because that's where they go to watch games. She's in the kitchen and Dylan comes in and he's like, "So you're Corbin's sister, huh?" And she's like, "Mm-hmm." And he's like, "Cool, so are you like a nurse?" And she's like, "Uh-huh." And then insert Miles because Miles is seeing all this, and Miles is like, "Dude, game's starting. Go sit down." Miles hands her the key to his apartment and is like, "Go study at my place." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, go do that." Tate's in his apartment. She's snooping around because why wouldn't you when there's a man who is very closed off but oddly not, and oddly protective of you. So you're gonna snoop around his apartment when given the key to it. Miles comes in, he's like, "Game's over." And then Tate says, "You thought I was someone named Rachel." And Miles instantly shuts down and is like, "Good night, Tate." So now it's Thanksgiving and Corbin and Tate are gonna go home to their parents. All of a sudden Miles is with them because Miles has no plans for Thanksgiving, so he's going with them to theirs. This is a good part to refill on. The family's talking about all things that you do in Thanksgiving, you know, what you've been up to. Anything cool happen? And also, Miles, your sex life. What's up with that? Yeah, so we find out Miles has not had sex for 6 years. And Corbin announces, "I assume it's 'cause you're gay." Well, Miles isn't gay. And Tate knows this because Miles had cut his hand on something doing things, and she stitched it up and he kissed her. So she knows for a fact, oh yeah, they kissed. So she knows for a fact that he's not gay. They go upstairs, everyone goes to bed. Tate notices outside her door in the middle of the night that there seems to be footsteps that stop and then walk back. She goes downstairs and there's Miles. They get to talking and he's like, I'm attracted to you. And she's like, wow, yeah, same. And he's like, but I really don't like love and feelings and I want none of that. I really just kind of want you for sex. And she's like, they start making out in the kitchen. Then Tate's dad comes in and says, well, you're definitely not gay. And so her dad just walked in on her fiercely making out with Miles. Miles establishes 2 rules for their sex arrangement. You cannot ask questions about my past, and you cannot expect a future from me. So this should be interesting. So now they're back at Tate and Corbin's / Miles's apartment. Corbin and Tate live directly across the hall from Miles. Convenient. They start their arrangement and everything is going really well. But then Miles is saying all these really nice things. Is it that nice? You don't have to be that nice. Don't lay it on so thick, because that's how girls catch feelings. And not only does he say all these really nice things during, but then after, he legitimately hits it and quits it. He's like, all right, goodbye, thank you, see you next time. So now it's another Thursday, which is game night, and Tate's like, oh, maybe Miles will be here. She goes to the kitchen to make herself some food like she usually does, and a hand touches the small of her back, and she smiles because she assumes it's Miles. That rhymes. But it's not Miles, it's Dylan, the gross. It's Dylan, and he's looking for a cup for his beer. She's like, well, you won't find it in my back pocket. And then Miles walks in. Miles is like, since when did you start drinking your beer out of a cup, Dylan? How's your wife? And Dylan's like, good, she's at work. She won't be home for at least 4 more hours. Corbin enters the room when he hears his name. Dylan's not bashful in the slightest about him hitting on his sister, even though he's married. And so Corbin's like, GTFO, Dylan. Things take a turn for the worse when one of their encounters goes a little bit differently. It ends with Miles immediately walking away and slamming the door to his bedroom closed after him, leaving Tate in his kitchen like, what did I do? So now things are kind of on the rocks for Tate and Miles, and he then tries to make it up to her by leaving a note on her door saying, hey, I'm gonna run an errand at 7, you should come with me. And she's like, I shouldn't, but I know I'm going to. And so she does, and they go to the airport to watch jets take off. They're at the airport having a really intense conversation, and basically it ends with Tate saying, Miles, either you admit that you want me for more than just sex, or you take me home. And he puts the car in drive. Some weeks go by, and Tate has one of her nurse hospital buddies come over to help her study. Miles sees all this, and then Miles comes to Tate and is like, did you have sex with him? Are you interested in him? Because he's jealous and he actually cares for Tate but won't admit it. Corbin walks in on their makeup session. So now things are awkward, but they're still doing their thing because Corbin's gonna adapt. Tate comes up with her own rule that says, hey, my one and only rule is don't lead me on if you're not going to follow through. Miles kisses Tate in front of Corbin, but that's a boyfriend move. That's all I'm saying. In the same day, Miles and Tate go back to Miles's place, and he says how he missed her, and she's like, and he's like, oh crap. And she's like, it's okay to miss me, Miles, but to him it's not. And then she's like, what did Rachel do to you? Miles starts sobbing, and she's like, it's okay, I don't have to know, oh my god. I'm gonna jump ahead like I tend to, but Miles and Tate are in the middle of their arrangement, and he calls her Rachel. which is no bueno. So she rushes him through to the end and then leaves, and it is over. And so she has her own apartment, she's leaving, she hasn't told him. Her and Corbin are loading up her car to move only like a little ways away. She walks out of her apartment, sees Miles's door, and figures she should knock. Ian answers and goes and gets Miles, and Tate is like, "Goodbye, Miles. I just want to let you know that we could have been great, blah, 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 blah." And he's like, "Goodbye, Tate." She sobs some more. Ian calls Miles an idiot, and now I think it's time to delve into Miles's past. Miles and Ian went to high school together, which is how they know each other. And Miles was in the office for I forget why, and the secretary asked him if he could walk the new student to the class that he had to go back to because she's in it with him. Her name was Rachel. Rachel and Miles fall in love, only to find out that Miles's dad is dating Rachel's mom. Miles and Rachel decide, we love each other anyway, and who cares, we're not actually related. So they go pursue their relationship, they get jiggy with it, and now Rachel's pregnant. Miles breaks it to his dad and Rachel's mom. They're livid. Now, flash forward, she has the baby. It's a boy. They name him Clayton. On the way home from the hospital a few days later, they're driving, and then they somehow end up in a lake, and Miles unbuckles his seatbelt. Rachel and the baby are stuck, and Miles has to pick who to save first. Clayton dies. Miles and Rachel try to recover from all of this, but eventually Rachel leaves him a letter saying, "I can't do this anymore. I don't want to blame you. I'm leaving." And this is why Miles feels like he doesn't deserve to love again or ever be loved. And this is why he treats Tate the way that he does. Tate is coming home from one of her shifts at the hospital to her very own apartment, and once again is met with a man outside of her door. Not drunk this time. It is Miles, and she is like, "Oh my God." Miles tells Tate that he misses her, and he tells her all about his son, and he finally lets her in a little bit and tells her he loves her, essentially. He takes her on an airplane ride, then he gives Tate the key to his apartment and in a little black box, so she thinks he's proposing, but he's not. And then he actually proposes, and she's like, "Oh my God." So now they're married and they have a baby of their own, and they live happily ever after. So here's the breakdown. Cover design is a 5 out of 5. It took me a minute to figure it out, and I had to finish the book to understand the water in the bubbles is symbolic of Clayton and Rachel and Miles almost drowning. It has nothing to do with Tate, but it's a great cover nonetheless. Characters are also a 5 out of 5. I love Miles's character, while I also hate him. He's been through so much. It hurts. Tate is great, but also like she's dumb sometimes, like, and Corbin is the protective older brother that, if you have a brother, you know what I'm talking about. Plot, I'm giving a 4-2. It is a romance novel, so of course you know from the very beginning that Miles and Tate will end up together, but there's so much that happens outside of their relationship. The ending is a 5 out of 5 because who doesn't love a happy ending? The book drop is a 4 out of 5. To me, it's the moment when Miles and Rachel and Clayton end up in the lake, and you're finally finding out what happened to Miles to make him the way that he is. So Ugly Love is going to get a 4.6 out of 5. Well, there you have it. I can add Ugly Love to the shelf. If you haven't yet, you should subscribe, because I do this all the time and my liver is probably going to pay for it.